Hey guys, this video will explain about one of the major texts in literary criticism, that is the death of the author, written by Roland Barthes. The concept of death of the author was explored by the French literary critic and cultural theorist Roland Barthes in the 1960s. Delving deep into the text, one may come to a conclusion or one may get the answer for certain questions, namely why is the author dead and what kind of reader is born and how do you see the return of the author and when is the identity of the author is important. So such questions are answered through this text, the death of the author. So the main idea discussed in the death of the author is that it completely opposes the traditional art of interpreting a text from the author's background. And Roland Barthes says that the text is completely separated from author and the meaning lies in the interpretation and understanding of the reader and not of the author. While explaining the meaning of the text, Roland Barthes raised the question of where the meaning of the text comes from, and is it in the text or is it produced in the act of reading. He asked questions, and traditionally meaning was thought to reside within the text, expressing the original intention of the author. Barthes argued that this method of criticism imposes limitations on the text. He also says that to give a text an author is to impose a limit on that text, to furnish it with a final signified, to close the writing. And at last, Barthes also argued that meaning is produced in the act of interpretation and not lies with the author. It is language which speaks and not the author, he says. The essential meaning of a work depends on the impressions of the reader rather than the passions or tastes of the writer. A text's unity lies not in its origin or its creator, but in its destination or its audience, he says. Roland Barthes gives various examples to justify the death of the author. He also quotes Balzac's test, Saracen, and he also quotes Marcel Proust and Bertolt Brecht. Barthes' ideas are similar to those expressed by Marcel Duchamp in The Creative Act. He says, all in all, the creative act is not performed by the artist alone. The spectator brings the work in contact with the external world by deciphering and interpreting its inner qualification and thus adds his contribution to the creative act, says Marcel Duchamp in The Creative Act 1957. And later what he says is that Roland Barthes, in the literary theory, the death of the author was accompanied by the birth of the reader, and a new emphasis upon reading and interpretation as a creative act of making meaning is there in the text. And he also expresses his views on reading as he says, reading is an activity where meaning is produced rather than passively consumed. The birth of the reader must be at the cost of the death of the author, he says. And the main thing in the visual arts is that the death of the author was signaled by the shift from abstract expressionist model of the picture as expression of the artist's emotion towards a new paradigm that focuses on viewer's experience. So this applies as much to happenings as it does to post-painterly abstraction and minimalism. So thus cancelling out the artist makes room for the viewer to become involved in completing the work. Roland Barthes also quotes Marcel Proust and Brecht to remind his ideas. The idea is that the author is the past of his own book and the present meaning defined only by the reader. He also compares the author to that of the father and the book as his child. The father as it exists in the past and the child is acting in the present. So he says the author is the act of past and the present is that the born scripture which is born with the book. The book written here and now only in the reader's mind. Barthes also explains the analogy of text and textiles. He says writing is a strand drawn from the culture written in a book. In Greek tragedy, every word has more than one meaning, and so they are ambiguous, and multiplicity is thus given by the readers and not by the author. The text unity thus lies not in the origin but in the destination. And in classic criticism, there were not much importance given to the readers, and there were not even attention given to the readers. And so Barthes explains the importance of reader than the writer. Thus, finally, Roland Barthes concludes that the author is a mere scripter who simply collects the pre-existing quotations. He is not able to create or decide the meaning of his particular work, and the task of meaning lies or falls in the destination, that is, the reader, he says. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for the video. Thank you.